What's up, everyone? This is Anthony Pompliano. Most of you know me as Pomp. You're listening to Off the Chain, simply the best podcast in crypto. Let's kick this thing off.
Landon Cassill is a professional NASCAR driver and Bitcoin and crypto enthusiast. In this conversation, we discuss what it is like growing up to race professionally, how he broke into NASCAR, what actually goes on inside the car during a race, how Landon got into crypto, and what he is currently doing in the space today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well.
Skirt, skirt. Want to know who has the best URL? Crypto.com. That's right, Crypto.com. They're a crypto platform with one goal, motherfucking mass adoption. That's why we're all here. We're trying to get crypto in every wallet. Crypto.com is helping people do that through buying, earning, lending, and card payment. Everything you could want at Crypto.com. Go help your boy out. Tell him Pomp sent you. Download the app or visit Crypto.com. Pomp's got you, always.
Ever wanted to get into mining and didn't know how? Don't worry, your boy Pomp's got you. Everybody got some electricity and Wi-Fi. All you got to do is go to coinmine.com. You buy a coin mine. It's like an Xbox or a PlayStation that helps you turn your electricity into Bitcoin. That's right. You purchase it. It shows up at your doorstep. You pull it out of the box. You plug it in, connect to your Wi-Fi. 5 minutes or less, you're mining Bitcoin. All you have to do is control it from the mobile app they provide, and then you receive over-the-air updates that add new coins and new features on a consistent basis. Kind of like how Tesla does over-the-air updates and updates the car software. Just you're updating your coin mine. Consumer mining made easy. That's right. Go to coinmine.com, tell them Pomp sent you, and thank me later.
As many of you know, crypto investors store their digital assets on exchanges or in cold storage for long-term safekeeping. However, this strategy doesn't help them grow their investment holdings or build overall wealth. With the new BlockFi interest account, users can now securely store their Bitcoin or Ether at BlockFi and receive 6% annual interest paid monthly in cryptocurrency. 6% is an absurdly high rate. It's the best rate in the industry. I highly suggest you go check out blockfi.com/pomp. Again, that's blockfi.com/pomp to sign up and start earning crypto today.
Anthony Pompliano is a partner at Morgan Creek Digital. All opinions expressed by Pomp or his guests on this podcast are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Morgan Creek Digital or Morgan Creek Capital Management. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Pomp as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of his opinion. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
All right, guys, bang, bang. I'm sitting here with Landon. We are in Las Vegas for a few conferences, but I wanted to sit down real quick and talk. Landon and I have actually known each other for a while now, and I think that the secret's kind of out that you're into crypto, Bitcoin, etc. But I figured we'd sit down and actually talk about it. So
was it a secret? Is there ever a secret?
Well, listen.
For some people, it might be a secret.
You're a professional athlete, so I don't know if secrets are allowed in professional sports.
I don't think it has to be a secret. If there's anybody out there that's keeping it a secret that you're in crypto, if you're an athlete, I don't think you need to come on out of the closet
to hide it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be hidden.
All right, let's start kind of early on, right? So pretty much everyone in racing seems to start when they're like a little kid, and there's this whole kind of series of leagues and all this stuff that you kind of work your way up to NASCAR or other racing leagues. Did you do that, and kind of where did you grow up, and what was your path into all this?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no definitive path to NASCAR. It's not like the NFL or NBA where it's pretty obvious that you start out in a pee-wee football or basketball and play in high school and college. In motorsports, there's a lot of different forms of motorsports that you can start out in, and it can take you to a lot of different places. I mean, there's drivers that might start out thinking they're going to go IndyCar racing and end up going NASCAR racing, or vice versa.
And for those that don't know, just separate out at kind of the professional level. There's IndyCar, which is more open wheel type racing. Indy 500.
Yep.
NASCAR is
stock car racing, cars with fenders. Daytona 500.
Yep.
Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson.
Got it. Landon Cassill.
Landon Cassill, yes. I'm from Iowa. I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and dirt racing is a huge thing in Iowa. But I didn't actually grow up dirt racing because I raced in go-karts, which is pretty typical for kids between the ages of 4 and 12. And I had really raced a lot in go-karts by the time I was 12 years old, and I was kind of ready to get into full-size cars. And my dad,
at 12,
yeah, my dad didn't want to get stuck racing go-karts for too long, and the dirt tracks in Iowa wouldn't allow me to race until I was 16. So there's one asphalt track in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, my hometown, called Hawkeye Downs Speedway, and they allowed me to race when I was 12 to 14 years old in their full-size cars. So that's how I started racing on asphalt and on pavement, even though I was kind of heading down a dirt racing path. And from there, there was a touring series in full-bodied cars that looked similar to a NASCAR-type race car that was traveling the country, and they allowed 14-year-old drivers. So when I was 14, I started traveling the country racing in what was called the ASA Late Model Series.
Okay, so at 12 years old, I couldn't even reach the foot pedals, I don't think. Like, what is it like being 12 and, your dad saying to you, hey, you're going to get in a real car,
yeah,
you're going to drive on the pavement, and I'm assuming you're competing against, like, adults, older teenagers or adults. Mm-hmm. How fast are these things going?
The first full-size car that I drove was what's called an IMCA modified, so it's an open-wheel car. It doesn't look like an Indy car, but to someone that doesn't know anything about racing, you might think it's closer to an Indy car than it is a stock car. But the front suspension and the frame itself is like an old Monte Carlo. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't have a body on it. It just doesn't have fenders. And it had about 400 horsepower and weighed 2,500 pounds. And I was 12 and I weighed about 100 pounds. And I was racing against adults. Yeah, and it was quite an experience. It's, at that age you make a lot of mistakes, and the mistakes have bigger penalties than when you're racing a go-kart. Mm-hmm. And my dad, you really had a policy from the time I started racing that he would support the best, in the ways that he could support. But I had to fix whatever I crashed. So growing up, starting in those modifieds, racing in late models, now you have a car that has fenders on it. It's a little bit easier to lean into people, maybe crash someone, whether it's on accident or on purpose. My dad would pay for it, but I had to physically fix it myself.
Very cool.
So that kind of taught me from a young age how to take care of my equipment.
Yeah, and probably I don't want to crash because I don't want to fix it type attitude.
Yeah. There was one time that I had an incident with another driver that was pretty intentional on my part in retaliation, and I caused some damage to my car, and I was 16, and my dad made me pay for it. And that was, I didn't have any money, so it was like a couple $1,000s, and I had to pretty much use my winnings that I had been earning to pay for the wrecked car. So I learned my lesson.
Yeah. And so at 12 to 14, how fast do those cars go?
About at the track that I was racing on, about 100, 110 miles an hour.
At 12 years old, you're going 110 miles an hour?
Yeah. Mid-corner speeds, probably 60 miles an hour. You're talking about, like I said, 400 horsepower. You're full throttle down the straightaways. You're driving it into the corner. You have to lift. You have to use a lot of brake pressure. You have to control the car from sliding and spinning out, and you have to try to maneuver your way around other cars. It's not just pushing the gas down and being flat out on the whole track.
I can't imagine going 110.
Driving a stick shift with a clutch and everything.
Yeah. Wow. All right. And then the NASCAR stock cars that you drive today, those go like, what, 220?
I have gone 220 in a NASCAR race car. It's at this point in NASCAR, it really depends on the aero package that NASCAR and the rules limitations that they have. The fastest I've gone is at Michigan International Speedway. I've gone over 220 miles an hour when we had 900 horsepower and small spoilers, so the cars didn't have a lot of drag. And I mean that's just you're just carrying a lot of speed, and it's for a 3,000 pound car. That's pretty fast. It's hard on the tires. It's hard on equipment to go that fast. Right now, our cars go about 200 miles an hour. We race this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Our cars will go about 200 miles an hour. And, our mid-corner speeds at Texas will be 175, 180 miles an hour.
Wow. So on the straightaways, you'll hit on average, let's say about 200 miles an hour. But into those corners and turns, it's really not that big of a difference. I mean, 20 miles an hour is 20 miles an hour, but it's not like you're going from 200 and braking down to 150.
Particularly at Texas this weekend, that's because of our aero package. We have a really big spoiler. Our cars make a lot of downforce. And when we have fresh new tires on the car, the weather's going to be cool this weekend. One end of the racetrack, turn 3 and 4, has a lot of banking to it, and we can run wide open through that corner without lifting. So you're talking about, at the end of the backstretch, we're almost 190, almost 200 miles an hour, and you're not lifting. So mid corner speeds are pretty high. You're pulling 2 or 3 Gs through the corner.
Going 200 miles an hour is one thing. Going 200 miles an hour through a turn is crazy.
It's not that bad. Our cars are built to go that fast, so they handle fairly well. At times they don't, and that's all relative to your competitors, but. They're supposed to go that fast, so it's harder to drive them at 140 miles an hour because they're not making downforce, they're not making grip. At 200 miles an hour, that's how fast they want to go. The real problem is when they have to stop all of a sudden. That's usually when bad things happen.
For sure. And so let's go back to, so you're like 16, right? 14, 16, you start touring. You're still in school, obviously, so you're like, have kind of two lives, it almost feels like. And I'm assuming most kids at school think it's pretty cool that, you're driving 100 miles an hour on the weekends. How do you get from that to NASCAR? Like, what does that path look like once you kind of realize, hey, I want to go do this professionally? What does that look like?
So fortunately for me, during that time period and during that age, the path that we were racing and the touring series that we were racing was a really good path to get to NASCAR. The teams that were flush with money, the manufacturers that had a lot of money to spend on driver development, on young driver development, they were looking at asphalt late model racers, which is what I was doing, as the next drivers. There's been, like I said, where I mentioned earlier, the multiple different paths. You have dirt racers and sprint car drivers, people that race in sports cars and road courses. They can all kind of end up in the same place, but that was a time period where the two most prevalent types of drivers were coming from open wheel midgets and sprint cars on dirt and late models, asphalt late models. So by the time I was 16 years old, by the time I was 15, 16 years old, I had been scouted by an agent. I had been signed to an agency, and I was racing 60, 70 times a year. And I signed a contract. I actually did a sort of an audition. It was kind of like a gong show audition with Chevrolet with 16 other drivers. And they all put us in race cars, and we showed our stuff in front of each other for
and like went out and
3
raced.
different tests. We didn't race, but it was a test. So you drove by yourself on the track. You had to drive the car for a certain period of time. They took a lot of notes. They looked at your data. The car was outfitted with telemetry, so they looked at your driving style. They listened to your feedback, and there were some pretty impressive drivers that were in that test. Joey Logano, who's a NASCAR champion, was in that test. He actually was the number 1 ranked driver that came out of that test and had a contract with Joe Gibbs Racing from there, and that was a Chevy team at the time. I was the number 2 ranked driver out of that test, and I got a contract with Hendrick Motorsports out of that test. Ryan Hunter-Ray, Indy 500 champion, was in that test. So there was some big names back then, and this is 12, 13 years ago. So. But like I said, I got a contract with Hendrick Motorsports, became a test driver for Hendrick, tested Jimmy Johnson's cars, Jeff Gordon's cars, won championship rings.
And how old are you when
this
is going on?
I was 17.
So you're 17 and still in school, but also being a test driver for these guys. You've got to be like, these dudes are legends.
So I actually finished. I'm young for my grade. I graduated high school when I was 17, and so this all was kind of happening in going into my senior year of high school, and I had enough credits that I was able to finish high school after my first semester. And senior year.
I did the same thing.
Yep. And so I moved to North Carolina with my grandma, and her and I lived together for the first 3 or 4 years of me racing professionally. And so the timing all worked out where my contract with Hendrick came at the exact same time that I was finishing high school.
That's awesome. And so
you go from literally in the cafeteria at high school to all of a sudden now you're test driving Jeff Gordon's cars for Hendrick Motorsports.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? And are you kind of like starstruck at the time, or are you like, hey, I'm here to kind of get into these NASCAR races and start winning races?
I was pretty starstruck at the time. I mean, I can
imagine.
One of my first jobs at Hendrick was to drive Jeff Gordon's Daytona 500 primary car for 2007 at a straight line test. So we used to go to proving grounds where they had like runways basically with several miles of straight lines, and you would take the car and you drive it in a straight line as fast as it would go, and they would collect aero data, and that's how they would build their aero maps for their simulation models. So
wow.
One of my first jobs was to drive his primary car for the upcoming Daytona 500.
And now in those large teams, a driver has different cars for different races, or are they taking one car and for each race they're actually changing the aerodynamics and the different components of it, but it's the same car and kind of chassis and it just changes per race?
It's at that time there was different cars for different races.
Wow.
And it's still that way now. NASCAR has the rules have kind of adapted to where NASCAR's really tried to make it to where you can run the same car at as many times as possible, but ultimately there's no spending cap and there's no limit on the car. There's no VIN number, right? That NASCAR tracks. There's no limit on how many times you can run a car. And the biggest teams that have the biggest budgets, what they're really doing is building cars, and when I say cars, chassis and bodies, right? So you have the chassis, which is sort of the mechanical side of it, and then the body, which is the aero side of it. Those cars are unique to pretty much each racetrack. So they might have a chassis configuration with an aero configuration that works at 5 or 6 different tracks. They have a chassis configuration and an aero configuration that works at 2 or 3 other tracks that are similar to each other. They probably have anywhere from 9 to 10 different iterations over the 38 race schedule that we have. So a lot of what that testing that I did was developing the different aero maps and the simulation models for them to research those cars, to build those cars. I mean, the biggest race teams, they're manufacturing companies, so it's a huge there's a huge facility to research and build these cars.
So I want to talk a little bit about, and you've been kind enough to kind of give me the crash course on racing. Really comes down to money, right? And money meaning the team structures are very unique in that, unlike other sports, as you mentioned, there's no spending caps. There's no kind of like salary cap type requirement.
There's no drivers union.
And so help me understand that there's like kind of large cap teams, I'll call them, or large teams, and there's the smaller, more budget type teams. On the large team side, most of these are car manufacturers or have some relationship with a car manufacturer. Talk a little bit about how that manufacturing relationship works, and then how does that trickle down into the hardware or the actual car they can put on the track, and the advantages that brings by them having access to that capital.
So that's one of my most exciting things to talk about right now in NASCAR, and the initial conversation paints a little bit of a bleak picture of how our sport works, and then the light at the end of the tunnel is where the sport is headed. So I'll walk you through that. Right now, you have the biggest teams right now, like Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, RCR, Stewart-Haas, and those teams are supported by the big auto manufacturers, Toyota, Ford, Chevrolet. Now, those teams also have the biggest sponsorships. They're the most well-funded. They have the best talent, the best leadership, the best engineering, the best drivers. And NASCAR has a rule book that we have to abide by when we build our race cars. But ultimately, even though the rule book has really tight tolerances, we're still responsible for building and manufacturing and designing our cars to fit those tolerances. So each team, even multiple different Chevy teams, right? The car that I drive is a Chevy, and the car that Hendrick Motorsports is building is a Chevy. Each team is responsible for their own manufacturing process, and they're responsible for their own proprietary components. So right now, the biggest teams are able to take the support that they get from the manufacturers, which is money, engineering support. You have a manufacturer like Toyota. They write a check to the teams, but they also have their own engineering facilities where they provide wind tunnel testing and chassis engineering and research and development support. Those teams are building race cars from scratch. They're building chassis from scratch. We don't buy them from anywhere. They're building them from scratch. They're building the bodies. They're taking the cars to the wind tunnel. They're R&D in those bodies. They're honing them in, even if it's to the thousandths of an inch. They have engineering teams that are building simulation. So these cars are, it's machine learning is a big thing for the big manufacturers.
Because it feels like there's a lot of data that goes into this, right? Like it almost feels like it's an iterative process, very similar to like software development, where you said, all right, we have kind of our first guess. So we're going to put that into the chassis and
they're constantly
aerodynamics.
reiterating it. They're constantly relearning, and then going back to the manufacturing plant, which they own or they developed, and remanufacturing new parts and pieces. So those are the teams that are having the most success. The challenge for the smaller teams in the sport right now are that it is so. It's so hard to catch up with that, especially when those big teams are subsidized by the auto manufacturers, because those auto manufacturers are not subsidizing the smaller teams like they are the big teams. So if you're a small team coming into the sport, it's actually more cost effective for you to just go to one of those big teams and pay them a licensing fee to use their technology. Right?
Got it. So the big team takes the resources from the auto manufacturer plus whatever else they have from sponsorships, etc. They're able to iterate faster. They, in theory,
create a competitive advantage,
better technology, etc.
Which is okay, right? Though it's a competition sport, we want to create a competitive advantage. The flaw in that is that they're taking that competitive advantage and they're able to sort of suppress their competition by selling whatever it is, however much they want of their technology back to their competition.
Got it.
Right?
So then they take that, let's say that they've made a car that goes at a certain track 215 miles an hour. They could technically sell to a competing team technology that makes the car go 205 miles an hour. Right? And that competing team may or may not understand that they're buying kind of inferior technology or configuration. And the team that is the larger team that's been subsidized and has the capital, they're kind of making that decision. It sounds like there's not that much transparency into this, et cetera. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, it depends on the individual relationships with the larger teams and the smaller teams. I mean, there's plenty of cases, I would imagine, where there isn't much transparency and the bigger team is charging the smaller team a lot of money, and the smaller team may or may not know if they're getting the most updated parts or the most updated technology. Or let's just say, instead of making assumptions, let's just say in the most authentic way, the big team that has 600 employees and spends $30 million per car that they field is sharing all of their information with the smaller team that's paying for this information. Well, that smaller team with lesser employees, even with all that information, still lacks the manufacturing capabilities and the manpower to keep up with the iterations that the big team has or is capable of, right? And then it also, those big teams have leverage over those small teams to control the price of that licensing fee. It's called a technical alliance in our business. So
technical alliance?
Yep, technical alliance. So the big teams, if the small team, you could game theory this, right? I'm not making an assumption, but let's just game theory it. If a big team is selling a technical alliance to a small team and the small team ends up outrunning the big team, what are they going to do? They're going to jack up the price of their technical alliance, right? So it's, and the same goes with the engine business. The engine business is the same way. The big teams, Hendrick Motorsports, they own the engine business. So they own their engine business, and they lease the engines to smaller teams. So there's a lot of incentive for Hendrick Motorsports on the engine side of things to make sure that, first of all, they're getting the best engines that they can get, and then their customers, they obviously need to build a quality product to their customers, but they control the price of they control the price of their own customers' cost to go racing through their engine leases. So that's the kind of interesting dynamic in the sport that makes it challenging for upward mobility in NASCAR for a team owner, the light at the end of the tunnel is that NASCAR is taking a serious move at changing that model.
And where do they want to move to? Like, what does that new model look like, you think?
NASCAR is they're not just looking at, they're making moves, and in 2021 we're going to be racing with a single source manufactured race car. So
interesting. So everyone will use the same manufactured car, and
for
so you take
all the
away
parts for all the cars, parts and pieces, it'll be sourced from. Or each piece that we have to buy will be sourced from the same place.
Got it. And can you make changes or adaptations or enhancements to those parts once you get them, or will it be almost the identical car for everyone?
Right now, the spirit of the project is that it will all be identical, right? So, our sport is competitive, and we're already tuned up with manufacturing plants, and we're already pretty savvy when it comes to looking at a part and saying, how can we improve this? So I can promise you that teams are going to look at parts that they're forced to buy, right, that we have to put on the car, and they're going to figure out a way to make it better within the rules, right? So I would say that NASCAR still has a decision to make on how they're going to police that and how they're going to make sure that parts haven't been manipulated or compromised. And I would imagine there'll be big penalties that come with that. NASCAR is probably going to be putting some sort of long-term freeze on the car so that the car can hold its value, right? So that you don't buy a car and race with it, and then 6 months later there's all of a sudden a new car that we have to buy.
Yep.
And then they're also going to put a limit on how many cars you can own. So you can't just buy 38 cars for all 38 races.
Got it.
You might have to buy 7 cars and figure out a way to make it through the whole season with 7 cars.
Make it work. Got it. And this is very similar. So I don't think I've ever told you this before, but I have someone that I know, a gentleman, Lucas DeGrassi, who used to be a Formula One racer and then was part of and now races in Formula E. So it's open wheel racing for electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, he had told me that Formula E, everyone uses the exact same car. Right? And so it's this idea that the advantage is not in the equipment, it's in who's behind the wheel. Right? And it makes it more competitive, and therefore it actually makes it more entertaining. And not just who's behind
the wheel, but who... Because it's not all about the driver. Even if you're in the same... Even if everybody has the same car, the same hardware, you still have a race strategist, you still have... general managers, you still have pit crews, right? So, like in Formula E, they have strategists, and it's about your communication with your team and how well you can set the car up and how well the driver can give feedback and build a car that's balanced for the race. And one of the questions that NASCAR has to answer to their manufacturers are, where are you going to let the manufacturers compete, right? If you're going to standardize every part and piece on the car, there's still a huge marketing incentive for Toyota to be the title sponsor of a race team because there's 70 million race fans and 5 million viewers on TV every week. But, I mean, do you want to develop some technology in our sport? And if you do, where do you want to develop that technology?
Yep.
Right? So, like in Formula E, to my understanding, the cars are standardized, like you said, but the manufacturers have some freedom to compete with each other in the drivetrain technology, right?
Got it.
Formula E, electric, it's pretty reasonable for them to think, hey, let's come in and use this motorsports platform as a way to help develop our EV technology.
Speaking of that, will NASCAR ever go electric, you think? What's kind of
I think
the general
so. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, right now, the first phase of this sort of single source manufactured model is the cars and the bodies and the chassis, and actually they're looking at some sort of spending cap, some sort of way to keep the teams from just running away with their funding. But the second phase of it is going to be the engine and the powertrain, and they're looking at some sort of hybrid regenerative energy to use for. And the conversations have been anything from a push-to-pass button like you've seen in IndyCar racing to letting the cars run off of their electric power source under cautions so that maybe it's like a timeout during a basketball game where the stadium gets quiet and you can talk again and you can, check your phone. It's just a lot of creative ideas, but ultimately, I think NASCAR is very well aware of where the auto industry is going and where they could end up. But it's hard to shake the idea of a V8.
I was gonna say, it feels like that's like NASCAR's like the ultimate American sport, right? Yeah. And having electric vehicles, something about it doesn't feel right.
Right.
And I'm not even a huge race fan, but obviously that's where the industry goes.
But see, NASCAR has 3 major national series. We have 2 series that race cars that are actually pretty similar to each other, the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. And the Xfinity Series is kind of like the feeder series to the Cup Series, but ultimately the cars are kind of the same. And then we have a truck series, right? So it makes sense to have a truck series. You're selling trucks on one end, you're selling cars on the other end. And this is just me talking, I'm not speaking for the sport, but maybe the Xfinity series someday could be the EV series, right? And that technology could be there, and the Cup series could be what it is.
Skirt, skirt. Want to know who has the best URL? Crypto.com. That's right, Crypto.com. They're a crypto platform with one goal: mass adoption. That's why we're all here. We're trying to get crypto in every wallet. Crypto.com is helping people do that through buying, earning, lending, and card payment. Everything you could want at Crypto.com. Go help your boy out. Tell him Pomp sent you. Download the app or visit Crypto.com. Pomp's got you, always. Ever wanted to get into mining and didn't know how? Don't worry, your boy Pomp's got you. Everybody got some electricity and Wi-Fi. All you got to do is go to coinmine.com, you buy a coin mine. It's like an Xbox or a PlayStation that helps you turn your electricity into Bitcoin. That's right. You purchase it, it shows up at your doorstep, you pull it out of the box, you plug it in, connect to your Wi-Fi, 5 minutes or less, you're mining Bitcoin. All you have to do is control it from the mobile app they provide, and then you receive over-the-air updates that add new coins and new features on a consistent basis. Kind of like how Tesla does over-the-air updates and updates the car software. Just you're updating your coin mine. Consumer mining made easy. That's right. Go to coinmine.com, tell them Pomp sent you, and thank me later.
One more word from our sponsor, BlockFi. Their new interest account allows you to securely deposit your Bitcoin or Ether at BlockFi and receive 6% annual interest paid monthly in cryptocurrency. This rate actually compounds, so you receive a 6.2% APY, which is very attractive given the alternatives. So you can actually take your Bitcoin, you can deposit it with BlockFi, and get paid an interest rate of 6% in return. Go check out blockfi.com/pomp. Again, blockfi.com/pomp to sign up and start earning interest on your crypto today.
What's the difference in the spending of the large cap teams versus the small cap teams? Are we talking about, $500 million to like $5 million, or is it, much closer to like $20 million to $10 million?
You have cars at the very highest end probably spending $1 million per race on their program.
Okay, and there's 38 races?
38 races, yep. And then on the very low end, you probably have cars that spend $100,000 a race.
Oh, okay, so 10x though.
Yeah.
Pretty big difference there.
Yeah.
And of the team sizes, you said that some of the larger guys might have 600 employees.
Yeah.
What does that look like on the lower end?
So the largest teams, that those that are spending $1 million a race probably are of that size. And a team that's spending $100,000 a race probably has anywhere from 10 to 25 employees. 10
Got
to 20.
it. Okay, so again, pretty material difference there. All right, so you've been doing racing for a while, and you're into crypto.
Yes.
So how did you first hear about Bitcoin, crypto, etc.? And then what did you do once you heard about it?
I first heard about it in 2013. And really through racing, because in 2014, a good friend of mine, Josh Wise, who hopefully some listeners on this podcast know who Josh Wise is, because he drove the Dogecoin sponsored car a couple times in NASCAR. And the Dogecoin community on Reddit came together and crowdfunded sponsorship for a race car, and they even believe it or not, this as crazy as it is, and this is why the internet is undefeated. They crowdfunded the fan vote to get him into the All-Star race.
Really?
And they beat Danica Patrick to get Josh into the All-Star race. Josh is a very close friend of mine, and I was really shotgun with him through this whole process.
How much did they have to crowdfund to get the sponsorship?
I think they raised 6 figures over the course of all of the stuff that they did. I think the community came up with $100,000 at least.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it was a huge impact on his team at the time. I mean, his team had no sponsorship, and they filled some major gaps in the schedule, and it was really good for Josh, you know.
Yeah.
And so, I loved it. I was super into it, and that was my first intro to cryptocurrency. And
I've never had anyone come on and say the first time I got introduced was through Dogecoin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, man, it's that. Honestly, that's just proves to you the power of energy and positive energy and community, which is the maybe one of the core tenets of crypto right now, one of the foundations that keeps it together. But for me, once I understood, my first impression of Bitcoin was this online money, right? And I didn't really get it. But once I understood the financial sovereignty side of it, I was like pretty interesting. Yeah, I was pretty interested in it. And I really early on, I looked at day trading and the markets, and I saw it as buying stocks or selling stocks. And fortunately, I think I was smart enough to say that's not what I'm going to do, and that's not what I can do. And I could probably teach myself or learn, but that I don't even want to take the time to do that. So I bought and held, and I'm a pretty persistent hodler of Bitcoin. And but where I got myself involved more actively was in the mining side of things. So, so we've talked about it a lot. I mine Bitcoin and Litecoin, and I've done it for a little while now, and it's paid off well at times, and they've it's been a struggle at other times, and I think ultimately it's taught me a lot about the space, because it's kept me engaged in the space as opposed to just hiding my keys and forgetting about it and then checking the price 6 months later. So it's kept me engaged. It's helped me network and build relationships like the one that we have, and other relationships that I have, and ultimately for me, my involvement in the crypto space has the potential for anything other than just my specific investment in Bitcoin, but the potential to work with companies in the crypto space as they become bigger and have marketing needs or want to be involved and have advisors or whatever it may be in their companies.
And so when you first saw mining, like what caught your attention about it, right? Because it's not like probably anything else that you've seen, and also it takes a little bit more sophistication to like buy the hardware. How do I actually set this up? How do I monitor it or kind of make sure that it's working correctly? That's not like, hey, I just signed up for a Coinbase account and I just let a market order rip and just bought some Bitcoin.
Yep.
So what was kind of the thing that drew you into the mining side? And then did you have technical background in terms of understanding some stuff, or did you have to really go kind of learn how to set it up?
I didn't have a ton of technical background. I'm not a total computer nerd, although in high school, I was a teacher's assistant to the IT director at my high school, and one of the jobs that I did for most of the time that I was a TA was help set up the networks at our school. So as for a teenager, having a very basic understanding of how computers are connected and how they operate on a network, I've had a very surface level understanding. But I think the reason that I was attracted to mining was because it seemed tangible and mechanical to me in a way that I understand how things work. It seemed like it was something that I could understand how it worked, even though computers can be confusing and networks can be confusing. The operations of computer performance and power usage and the fluctuation of price and the flow of production, that seemed very, I don't know, it seemed like I could identify with that. And it also, it seemed like to me Bitcoin mining it's a blue collar gig, you know, and in a lot of ways, and I kind of identify with that too. So I felt like that was something where I could be involved in that, and that could be where I get, like I said, I'm hooked into the space, but I'm not necessarily over my head.
Yeah, for sure. And so as you look at it in terms of the intersection of racing and crypto, there's obviously the sponsorship angle, right? So there's plenty of crypto companies that would love to sponsor either race cars or drivers or whatever. Are there other elements of either things that NASCAR is doing today or things you can do in the future where you see some sort of intersection with the currencies or applications of blockchain technology? Or do you think it's more of, it's probably going to stick in the sponsorship area for a while, and then maybe down the road that could happen, but probably not likely in the short term?
I mean, yeah. So obviously, right now, sponsorship is a perfect avenue for that, and that's no different than it's a great idea for crypto companies to be involved in any sports league or any influencer. NASCAR, from a sponsorship perspective, I will say that I feel like NASCAR shares a lot of the same core values that people in the cryptocurrency world share. So as these crypto companies mature to the point that they're ready to market to the masses, I think that our demographic is a very similar demographic as far as, like I said, the sort of financial sovereignty and just the belief system. So that's why my network in the crypto space is important to me, because I think that the opportunity will present itself eventually. As far as an actual use case in our sport, I've had, my mind has gone a million different directions, and really I would love to field ideas from anybody that sees opportunities. You and I have had a lot of conversations that, one example could be the fractional ownership side of things. And that doesn't necessarily have to be limited to just a driver, right? In a driver contract, we've talked about basketball players, or what's the name of the basketball?
Spencer Dinwiddie.
That's right, Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, his attempt at tokenizing his contract, it sounds genius and it sounds, groundbreaking, but it's really just another version of what a lot of people are already doing behind the scenes. Golfers have staked themselves with investors. Race car drivers have staked themselves with investors. I think that blockchain provides just a technology that can more cleanly and more cleanly define what those investments look like, but then also open it up to a mass audience. So I think you could see race car drivers doing that. I think that you could also see race teams doing something like that. So in NASCAR, I mean, obviously we would have to have permission from the sanctioning body, because the sanctioning body needs to know who owns what. But we're not totally a franchise business like the NFL or NBA. I mean, the drivers are still independent contractors. There's no union. The race teams ultimately are independent
employers.
Employers and independent organizations. So there's a lot of assets in the racing industry that can be tokenized, if that's a fair thing to say. Well,
and I think to me, it's, hey, you could tokenize the contracts of the drivers, right? You could tokenize the ownership of the teams. There's even things that you can do around similar how people are doing like supply chain logistics, etc. You can do it with the parts.
And I think so we have, and this is, NASCAR is not totally unique, but we're we're an ecosystem that does business with itself, right? And in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of money that is in NASCAR that stays in NASCAR that's totally endemic to NASCAR, right? You have money changing hands from NASCAR to the team owners, going from the team owners to the drivers, going back into NASCAR, from the money coming from the race fans. Let's say that's money outside of NASCAR going into the racetracks, and the racetracks, that money going to NASCAR in different forms. So there's tons of opportunity for payment systems.
I was just going to say, that's the holy grail, is to get NASCAR to accept Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I don't, that's not, I mean, you talk about like Litecoin and Align payment systems and what they're doing with the Miami Dolphins and, all the different services out there that have over the last few years have really figured out efficient ways to settle payments in cryptocurrency. Give me a call and I'll take you straight to the people in NASCAR that can make those decisions, because that's not unrealistic at all. You know, but taking it a step further, I don't see why, you know, an industry like NASCAR couldn't have a native payment system, you know, or a native currency of its
fan
own.
loyalty, all that kind of stuff, for sure. All right, before we finish up, I want to ask you what I think of as frequently asked questions that I've always had in my head for NASCAR drivers.
For sure. Where do I do when I have to go pee?
That's actually one of the questions. And so just so people at home know, we did not prepare this. He has no clue any of the questions I'm going to ask him. But the first question is, what do you do when you're racing? You got to pee.
I always turn that one around. I'm going to make this one quick.
Okay.
I'm going to turn that one around on you. Pomp Global, new sponsor of mine, funding. Morgan Creek Digital is on the hood of the car. It's a multi-million-dollar investment.
Yep.
We're in the top 10 of the Daytona 500, and there's 20 laps to go in the race. You're on the edge of your seat on my pit box, and I come over the radio and I say that I have to go pee.
Yep, not happening.
What do you want me to do?
Keep driving, man.
There you go. Pee in your pants.
Yep, and that's just it.
You got it.
There's no special systems. There's no anything.
No, nothing
just
fancy.
it.
Now, I will tell you that I have only had to pee my pants in a race car one time. So.
Once ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've been in a lot of race cars.
Yeah. So the races are 4 hours. You know, if you're smart, you can hold it.
Yeah. And really, my thought process there is. Don't
overthink it.
So, second question, and then we'll go back to the first question, is are race drivers professional athletes?
Yeah, absolutely.
I tend to think that actually people don't understand how difficult it is, both from a physical exertion standpoint and the toll your body takes, and then also the sitting there going 200 miles an hour, holding the steering wheel.
Yeah, like holding a car. Yeah, I mean, you're holding a 3,000-pound car. And I mean, so I wear a heart rate monitor in the car. I track my biometrics and one of my hobbies. So my hobbies outside of racing are endurance sports, but it's not just a hobby because I feel like it helps my sport. You know, it's an investment that I make in my craft to compete in endurance sports. And my heart rate in a 4-hour NASCAR race is actually, you could almost overlay it on my heart rate on a 4-hour half Ironman triathlon.
Wow.
So it's a very, and it's kind of the same to a marathon. It's very close to a marathon heart rate over a 4-hour marathon.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's, I think I posted on social media one of the hotter races we had this summer. My average heart rate was like 145 for a 3-hour race.
Holy shit. Yep. So the reason why I asked that is as an athlete, you've got to stay hydrated.
Yep.
So you're drinking a bunch of fluids.
Yep.
And anyone who's played sports before, finding the balance between staying hydrated and not having to pee all the time is a balance.
So we lose about 15 pounds of fluids in a race. I'm able, typically on a race where I'm going to lose that many fluids, I'm able to replace about 120 ounces in the car.
Got it.
I don't drink while I'm racing, but when there's breaks, when there's caution periods, I'll suck down a 24 ounce bottle like it's nothing, and I usually drink about 5 or 6 of those in a race.
Okay, so next question: do you bring your cell phone in the car during the race?
Not allowed to.
Not allowed to.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no texting and driving during the race.
Cell phones have accelerometers in them, and we're not allowed to have accelerometers in the car.
Well, why not?
NASCAR has limitations on the data that you're allowed to collect in the car on a race weekend. So in testing environments, it's pretty much wide open. Our cars are outfitted with hundreds of thousands of dollars of instrumentation. But on a race weekend, there's a lot of data collection in our car, but it's all sort of funneled through NASCAR.
Got it. Yep. What do you bring in the car with you for the race? So obviously you bring some fluids. Are there other things that you bring that maybe people wouldn't think about, or is it just pretty much fluid and then you get in your fire retardant suit?
No,
let's get racing.
Yeah, I mean, I have my fire suit, shoes, gloves, helmet, head and neck restraints. I have a carbon fiber bottle cage like you'd have on your bike if you're a road cyclist or something like that, and I drink out of a 24 ounce bottle, and I do that instead of a Camelback or like a mechanical system, because I like to keep track of how much I'm drinking. So I have that right by the window of my car when I come in for a pit stop. There's in a pit stop, you see the guys that run around the car. There's one guy that's actually dedicated to the driver. His job is to get me whatever I need. So if I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'd ask him for one. But I have him put my drink mix in there, and then he'll pull a tear off the windshield to give me a fresh windshield.
Very cool. What's the scariest situation you've ever been in racing?
It's usually, I don't typically get scared behind the wheel. I'm pretty used to it, to the fear factor of it all. But usually the couple tenths of a second between when your tire blows out and you're headed straight to the wall is the scariest.
Have you had that happen?
Yeah, I had it happen a couple months ago. I blew a tire at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and hit the wall at about 160 miles an hour.
Holy shit.
And yeah, it was a pretty bad wreck, and it was like a 35G hit. So if you could imagine a 160-pound body turning into a, multiply that by 35.
Yeah.
That's how much of a hammer that my body was going into the wall.
Dang.
It didn't feel good. I was sore for a while.
What when you got out of the car, was it something where you were like, hey, I got pretty messed up there? Or
yeah, I mean, so you go to the infield care center, you see the doctors. I have to take a concussion test. Fortunately, I did not have a concussion, but I had a lot of bruising on my body. I had some rashes from like where the seat belts. You could, I wear what's called a 9-point harness. So there's 9 points of anchoring on my seat belts. You could see the outline on my body in bruising where my seatbelts are, where they line up on.
So it
me.
kind of did its job, though.
It did its job for sure, but I was very sore. I see, I see a physical therapist every Monday after a race, whether I need it or not. 7 a.m. every Monday, and we just go through my body and my mobility, and that's kind of what kicks me off for my training week, so that I'm ready to train. After a wreck like that, I saw my physical therapist every day that week, and I didn't train at all.
Yeah.
You're talking about Epsom salt baths and recovery.
Yeah, for sure. Is rubbing racing?
Rubbing is definitely racing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What is the culture within drivers around this, right? Because I think most people, they don't get to see kind of the driver's perspective. And so it looks like there's a lot of jockeying and there's a lot of intentional kind of rubbing or bumping or
NASCAR
whatever.
is a very physical sport when it comes to the cars and drivers. I feel like for the most part, we get along as drivers off the track. We're pretty intense with each other on the track. There's a lot of mutual respect, especially at the top level in the Cup Series. The drivers have a lot of respect for each other, but we race each other really, really hard. And we have a lot of different ways that we communicate with each other on the racetrack. Based on how you race the other drivers, there's a way to send messages and a way to
like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one of the most useful tools to send a message to another driver is to stick your middle finger out the window. So the bird goes a long ways, and it can say a lot of things. And really
that is amazing.
The vigor in which you send the bird can send a lot of messages too. Are you shaking your hand? Is it a soft bird? Do you just and I'm not joking.
That. Yeah, I'm sure.
But also, I mean, you use your car. I mean, it's when the caution comes out, pulling up alongside of somebody and bumping them, can send the message that you didn't like what they did. Sometimes drivers will pull up to you and they'll try to cut your tire. Our cars have sharp edges on them and they want to rub against you and they might cut your tire. They might, rub on your car and put some damage on your car that can hurt your performance. If they don't like what you did. I mean, that's the gritty part of NASCAR racing.
That's an elite level. To use the car to pop your tire is an elite level of being able to drive going, even 50 miles an hour, let alone 200.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not someone that likes to wreck other people because I don't want to get wrecked, right? And that's
true. That's true of crypto trading as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you're in a tickle fight with another driver, I mean, the best way to get your shit piled up is to just start wrecking people. But sometimes, for me, the best way to send the message, or at least get what I wanted to get out of it, is just put damage on their car. Like, I'm not going to wreck you, but I'll damage your car, because it's going to screw up your performance. Your team's not going to like it. Your car owner, is going to cost him money. And, it's like, hey, if you're going to screw with me, I'll just damage your car.
Yeah.
And there's ways that you can do it without hurting your own car. And that's one of the ways, I guess, that drivers communicate with each other. But the bird is always a good place to start.
Don't tell anybody how to do it. We don't need on the LA freeway anyone doing anything crazy. What's the last question, and then we'll talk about some aliens. But what's the craziest thing you've done to train for driving?
Man, I mean, I have spent hours and hours behind the wheel of race cars, and in the simulator. Our simulation tools are actually not necessarily driver training tools as they are engineering tools. But when I worked for Hendrick Motorsports, I mean, I've been in the car for 6-7 hours straight without getting out, because we were at a test, and we had a test plan, and we had to get everything done, and we were beating the daylight. And those are the tests where you're putting your life on the line, lap after lap after lap. You have a several $100,000 race car with that much more money invested in the instruments that are on it, and you're driving at 200 miles an hour, and you have to do that all day long, and it's all for the greater good of building faster race cars. So
I love it.
I
Fans
feel
love
like,
it.
Yeah, I feel like just the business itself is the craziest thing you could do. I mean, I've been grinding at this for a long, long time.
For sure. Before you get to ask me a question, aliens, real or not?
I think I probably listened to the Joe Rogan Experience too much to not believe in aliens. So I think aliens are real, or I think there's something. I think there's something living out there.
Do you think they've ever been to Earth? There's been contact?
I don't know. I think that in my capitalist belief, and the maybe not capitalist, maybe that's the wrong word to use. What am I trying to say? What are we as human? What
like sentient beings?
Yeah. I think
we're definitely capitalists too.
Yeah, we're definitely capitalist. I guess that in the way
like
that
intelligent life form.
In our nature as humans, it's hard not to. It's hard not to think that if aliens were here, for me, that they would have taken us over if they were more powerful than us, right? So I don't know. I have a hard time believing that there's aliens out there that are just watching us, and I feel like if they had the technology to know about us and we didn't know about them, then we probably wouldn't be in existence right now.
I feel like they might just be watching, and be like, look at these idiots.
Right. So I think
there's dumb stuff they're doing.
I can see that like maybe there's life forms out there that we're more advanced than, that we just haven't found yet, and they haven't found us.
If they were watching, they'd be like, look at this. Every Sunday they show up and they just drive around in a circle.
yeah, exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, to finish up, what one question do you have for me?
One question that I have for you. Oh my gosh. How long is this journey for you? How long is this crypto journey?
Oh, people already know.
Are you a crypto lifer? Is there an exit someday? Is there a...
Yeah, look. So there's two separate things. One is the technology, the assets, etc., and then the other is like what I was call like the media stuff. So there's Twitter, writing every day, the podcast. On the media side, one day I'm going to wake up and I'm just going to say it was a fun ride, but I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I could see
and
that.
You may never hear from me again.
What are you reading right now?
Reading? I'm actually reading Edward Snowden's Permanent Record.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that one's pretty good. I just finished recently Steve Schwartzman. I think Whatever It Takes is what it's called. That was pretty good. But to me, it's just the media stuff is it's fun and it's a way to kind of collect thoughts, talk to people, all stuff. But it can be draining, and at some point, I think I'll just be like, all right, see ya. Yeah. And it'll free up a lot of time, right? It'll allow me to go read more. It'll allow me to kind of do other things. But for right now, I'm having fun, so we'll keep with that. And then on the investing side, I don't think that I could ever walk away. So we'll see what happens there.
Nice.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, I appreciate you doing this. Where can people find you online online or find out more information if they want to get in contact with you?
I'm on Twitter, Landon Cassill, at Landon Cassill, LANDONCASSILL, and my DMs are open. So
that's like Mississippi when you're a little kid and you learn how to say
CASSILL. Yeah, and I'm on Instagram as well. So, but Crypto Twitter can find me on Twitter.
All right, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Hey everyone, Pomp here. If you like this episode of Off the Chain and want to help us take crypto to the top of the Apple, Spotify, and other podcast charts, please do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe. To review, simply go to the Off the Chain homepage, scroll down until you see the 5 blank stars. Taking 15 seconds to fill those stars in and leave a quick review goes a long way in helping us take the entire crypto ecosystem to the top of the charts. I appreciate you listening and see you next time on Off the Chain.